And we'll presume our sixth board member will be joining us shortly here.
Do we need to wait for anything, Pete, to know that it's broadcasting, or?
No, I'm sorry. They just texted me, so we are live. So
Okay.
You may proceed.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the, let me get my glasses. Good evening and welcome to the June 11th meeting of the City of Kalamazoo Zoning Board of Appeals, a volunteer advisory board appointed by the City Commission. Tonight's meeting is being held electrically and is being streamed live on the city's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Mr. Eldridge, are there any announcements or changes to the original agenda?
There are no changes to the original agenda, but I do want to just remind our audience that is listening tonight and maybe listening as well as watching the video, but we do have 4 cases that are being talked about tonight. The call-in number, again, which is shown on the screen, is 269-226-6573. And what, we started essentially accepting public comment at 6:30. So at any time between now and when we get to that point of the public hearing where we start listening to the public feedback received, the public can continue to leave messages for those cases up until that time. So when you do call, please specify what the address is of the case you're speaking in support or in opposition of or speaking to, so that we know which hearing to play that voicemail message for. Thank you.
Thank you. So any public watching, any public watching that wants to make public or make a comment on any cases, the numbers on the screen, it's 269-226-6573, and then it will be played at the public comment portion of that case. We'll now move on to the acceptance of the May 14th minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
And is there a second?
Motion. Yeah.
And Mr. Skalsky's second. Any discussion? All in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. Okay. Minutes are passed. I will now explain our procedure for tonight's public hearing. For each request, the secretary will read the application into the public record. The applicant or representative will then have 10 minutes to provide their comments. Following that, public comments received via phone will be aired for the panelists and audience. And again, the number to call for that is 269-226-6573 for public comments on any case. After the public comment period, we will close the public hearing on the request. Once the public hearing is closed, the board will then conduct what is called a finding of fact, where the board states what they feel are the facts of the request. The board must approve the finding of fact. Therefore, the first vote you hear is not a ruling on the request, but on the finding of fact. And then the board discusses the request in order to determine a ruling. The board reserves the privilege to ask questions of persons who have already spoken, even though the public comment portion is now closed. Once discussion is ended, the board will move on to a roll call vote. A full board consists of 6 members, with 4 votes required to grant a non-use variance or a use variance. And tonight we have 5 members, and it still requires 4 votes in favor to grant the variance. I will now ask the secretary to read the first case into the record, and this is a motion for reconsideration. So with a
Mr. Chair?
motion, yes,
Oh, Mr. Chair, I will be reading it into the record just to articulate, because this is not something that we go through each, every month. In fact, we rarely have these come up. So anyways, so this motion of reconsideration is related to a dimensional variance that was granted at the May 14th, 2020 meeting, the last regular meeting, and it's related to the fencing height in the front yard at 1503 Washington Avenue. The dimensional variance was approved by one vote, and then that same evening after the meeting was done, I was contacted by board member Christina Doan, who indicated that it was, she was having some technical difficulties on her end, and there's some other issues. Anyways, she did not intend to support that variance and wanted to put forth a motion of reconsideration. So a motion was circulated via email for reconsideration, put forth by Christina Doan. It was seconded the following day by Ms. Vanden Hamburg. And so before the board, is this motion of reconsideration to bring that approved dimensional variance back for discussion and revote. So with that being said, the next step is for the board to have a discussion, and this discussion does not include the applicant for the property. This is simply the board members discussing the merits of the reconsideration, and then we'll do a roll call vote, and then based on that roll call vote, either that dimensional variance result stands, or we essentially rehear that dimensional variance and bring the applicant back in to speak. Hopefully that's clear enough for everybody. So I'll turn it back over to the chair. So really it's a matter of just having that discussion now, and then let myself know when we're ready for a roll call vote.
okay. So the motion is on the table now, and this is our opportunity to discuss that. Any discussion?
I have no comments and I support a vote.
With that, not hearing any further comments, Mr. Eldridge, can we have a roll call vote?
We'll start with Ms. Vanden Hamburg.
No.
And again, this is an affirmative response. I should have said this at the beginning, but an affirmative response is supporting, the reconsideration to bring it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to clarify, this is a parliamentary procedure. So the question before the board is, do you wish to reconsider your vote? Yes or no? So a yes would be to say, yes, I want to reconsider it. I want to rehear it. I'd like to vote on the question again. A no to the motion to reconsider is, no, I'm going to let it stand. I don't want it to care to discuss it anymore. So with that clarification, a yes means you'd like to consider the vote and perhaps reverse it. A no means you want to let the action stand and you don't want to discuss it any further.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Robinson.
Thanks
Then
for the
I need-
clarification.
Then I need to go back and rescind.
Okay. Let's start we will start the roll call again. So again, a yes vote is to reconsider this. A no vote is to let the action stand. And we'll start with Ms. Vanden Hamburg.
All right. Yes.
And Skalski,
No.
Lager,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Doan.
Yes.
Okay, so that is That is approved.
I think Mr. Flaw has.
Mr. Flaw was, there's Chris.
Do I get to vote?
Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry, I was late.
That's all right.
I think Mr. Flaw did
No,
appear on my screen right before, when the motion was on the table before we started voting.
yes, that's when I did appear. My answer, if you want my roll call vote, my answer is no. I do not want to discuss this further.
Okay. And that would still be a 4-2 affirmative vote to reconsider the variance. So we will now move to Part B, which is to open up the hearing for just the originally there was 3 variances for 1503 Washington Avenue. We're just talking about the third variance as indicated in that memo. So I'll just read it. So now what's before the board is a dimensional variance from Chapter 6, Section 6.3A2 for a 2 foot of 2 feet to allow 6 foot fencing in the front yard along Washington Avenue and Division Street where only 4 feet is permitted in residentially zoned areas.
Okay, and with that, I invite Ms. Harrington to address this. Now, I know we talked through this last week or last month, but it's probably good to refresh our memories.
Sure. As we discussed last month, we were granted the use variances for all 3 parcels.
Shoot, I think we've got some lagging, or at least Ms. Harrington seems frozen.
We'll just.
Let's give her a second to come back on this. Probably you guys have experienced the same thing too on Zoom.
I'm having it with everybody right now.
Yeah.
You're even lagging once in a while.
Well, and so while we're waiting for Ms. Harrington to rejoin the meeting, I would point out there is no necessity for a motion and a second to reconsider. You've already taken that motion. You're basically rewinding and going back to the point where you took the vote. So the motion that was made at the last meeting is now in play, if you will, and the second is in play. So all you have to do is vote yes or no on the motion, because that is what you're reconsidering. You don't need a separate second motion and second, because you've basically already took care of that with the motion for reconsideration.
Okay, thank you for that
Thank you.
clarification.
And what I have looking back at my notes is Ms. Doan moved approval of the dimensional variance related to the fence, and Mr. Flaw seconded that motion. I don't have the meeting minutes directly in front of me, but that is, so
Mr. Eldridge's recollection is correct. It was moved by Ms. Doan and seconded by Mr. Flaw, and the motion was stated in the affirmative so as to permit the dimensional variance. So a yes would be in favor of the variance, a no would be to deny the and allow, the vote for yes would be to allow a 6-foot fence where a 4-foot fence would be permitted. A no vote would be to deny the variance and keep the fence height at 4 foot.
Thank you.
I'm back.
Ms. Harrington is back.
Yeah,
While you were gone, I'd like to just summarize.
sure.
Attorney Robinson gave some clarity on this, or some clarification on this. So now that we have voted to reconsider, the motion from last month that was made and seconded properly is back on the table. Before we return to a roll call vote on that matter, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to sort of refresh our memories on the Washington Street parcel and the fence situation on that.
Sure. Thank you. I don't know what you guys heard before the technical difficulty, but we have an urban agriculture initiative that we are undertaking in the Edison neighborhood. And our request was to have 6-foot fencing in that particular parcel and all of the other ones as well. And we were denied for the first two, and for the 1503 Washington site, we were granted the variance for the use, the dimensional variance for that particular site. And if I were to offer any further insight into it, into kind of what we discussed last month, it's just the same. It's an agriculture initiative. This particular site is going to be a micro nursery. And we just wanted to kind of keep the continuity of the aesthetic. We wanted to make sure that the integrity of the food and the produce would be able to be maintained, the safety of what we were growing, and just to create to leverage design to be able to make it clear that these are proprietary businesses that are infused throughout neighborhoods. You know, that's what we want to expand and do these things. And so that's kind of what the mindset and the rationale for the request was in the first place. And so, you know, even with I didn't think about it, but right down the street from the site on Jackson, there is a variance for the fencing. The KPS Transportation Hub, they have really high fences there. And so you can see that there are fences that have dimensional variances throughout the neighborhood, at least one anyway. And so we just wanted to be considered in that way as well. And that's, I think that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Administrator Eldridge, can you confirm the KPS variance?
Well, what I can tell you is because it is a KPS property, it's a public school property, and they wouldn't be required to go through a zoning variance process. I also can tell you that those fences are older fences, so they also predate our ordinance. But yeah, the review and approval process for public school buildings, just like state institutions like Western, goes through the state of Michigan and is not subject to local zoning. So it wouldn't have, we wouldn't have seen it come through as a variance, but also I know a lot of that fencing is, has been there for some time.
Thank you. Now, at this point, because this motion is carried over from last month, do we have a public comment period?
No, there's actually no requirement because technically you're reconsidering the vote. Everything that's
Okay.
happened taken place is on the record. And you did give Ms. Harrington an opportunity to address it. And you didn't have to, but that's acceptable. But you don't have to open it up any further
Thank you.
because this is an internal procedural matter for the board.
Thank you. So at this point, I open it up for discussion amongst the board on the motion to, or on the motion itself. Again, as was explained, a yes vote is to support the variance that allows the 6-foot fence, and a no denies that variance. In this case, I will be voting no, I think for the same reasons that we voted no on the other parcels. The idea that these are urban agricultural initiatives embedded in residential areas, in my opinion, doesn't really deny that this is a residential area, and that we as a board have been pretty consistent over the 2 years, I believe, that I've been on the board of denying variances regarding fences in residential areas that don't meet, that aren't consistent with the zoning that's in place in there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the only other comment I want to make is just from driving by the site again. There isn't any fences in the adjacent yards to this corner lot. And this corner lot is 33 feet wide and 100 feet in length. So, it's got some, doesn't have much depth to it, but I think that that's something that the board should look at, is just the visual impact as well, since there aren't adjacent fences.
Any other discussion before we ask for a roll call vote?
Yes, I'm going to be voting in favor of keeping the 6-foot fence. And if we have voted in the past for extenuating circumstances to allow a higher fence. One of them was in the Stewart neighborhood. We voted to have a higher fence that was going against against traffic for the sake of privacy, and also for the same reasons of making sure that the people know that field right next to the bed and breakfast was in fact proprietary, because they've had people wandering in there and pretending like it was a park. I think taking staff's point and how there is no adjacent fences, that I don't think there will be any issues. These lots have been vacant for a while, and as far as I can tell, the record does not show that there is anyone with any real concern about this. So because it's a vacant lot, it's not a house, it doesn't fit the normality of homes. So there will not be a significant contrast. It is obvious this is different. This has had variances. This has a variance for other reasons. There is no legitimate reason aesthetically. I think it's in the spirit of the ordinance, for the very same reason we gave the variance to begin with, to have a 6-foot fence. I see no reason why I wouldn't vote yes for this. I see no significant impact on the community. Thank you.
Hearing no other comments, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes. And again, this is in the affirmative. So a yes vote is to approve. And we'll start with Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Lager,
No.
Skalsky,
Yes.
Flaw,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg, I'm sorry, Beth, did you hear me?
Oh,
Oh,
you're on
you're
mute.
muted.
No.
Thank you. Ms. Doan,
No.
So we needed 4 to pass the variance, and by my count, we had 3. So the motion is denied. Thank you.
4-foot
Alright.
fence it is. Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye, you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank
Okay,
you.
no problem. Thanks. See y'all later.
Now we move on to 112 East Cork Street. Could I ask the
Mr.
secretary? Oh, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, I would suggest we move this to the end of the agenda. I'm going to try to contact the applicant because they had yet to log into the Zoom meeting. So
Okay.
without them here, we really can't have that discussion.
All right, so we're moving on to the third case on the agenda, 725 Academy Street. Ms. Doan, can you read it into the record?
Yes, 1 moment, please. An application, oh, that's Cork Street. I have these in order. The applicant requesting a variance for, okay, apologies. An application for variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Mike Cowett, owner of 725 Academy Street, which is located in Zone CN1 Commercial Neighborhood District. The applicant is requesting 1, a use variance from Chapter 4, Section 4.2 Q3 to allow the relocation of a single-family dwelling to the rear of this parcel for residential occupancy, where the CN1 district requires commercial use of the floor space on the ground level. 2, a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.2 for 6 off-street parking spaces, where 2 off-street parking spaces are the maximum allowed. Please note, this request will not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variances only regarding the items described above.
Thank you. Will the applicant please explain the request?
Sure. I'm Kurt Artema, and Mike Hewitt is here as well. And Mike and I will both be speaking. I work for a company called AVB we're based in Portage. We are partners with the Hinman Company on the 400 Rose project in downtown Kalamazoo at Rose and Lovell Streets. And we have had success with 400 Rose and really enjoyed working downtown. It's kind of our two companies' first joint venture in downtown Kalamazoo. And we're excited about where it's headed and where it's been. And we are now exploring the opportunity to add some additional housing on the corner of Park and Cedar. We have acquired land there at Park and Cedar, including the house at 427 South Park Street. That house this is somewhat of a unique request, but what we're planning to do, and it's a complicated project, but we have been searching for options for saving and preserving those houses on Park Street as best as we can. There are 3 houses there. 2 are large houses. All of them are 100 years old or approaching 100 years old. And the 423 and 429 South Park Street are again very large, and we've been seeking opportunities to move them somewhere else and have not been able to find a location that's viable for those 2 houses to move to. So we've been doing some salvage work on those, and we'll be doing a training session with the Historic Preservation Commission and one of their subgroups in the next couple of weeks as well on properly removing historic windows and salvaging those windows and as many pieces from those houses as we can. But we've been working again for several months on a move of 427 South Park Street. This is a smaller house built in 1923. I think you have a photo of it in your packet. The house is the right size to move. It's still going to be really challenging. There are power lines and street lights in the way, and that process is being worked out with Consumers Energy right now. But our intent is to move the house. I'm sorry. What's that? Sorry. I heard something.
I believe that was background noise.
Okay.
I believe that was background.
I apologize.
You can continue on.
No problem. No problem. So we have been working with Mike Kiewit, who has purchased the property at 725 Academy Street to move 427 South Park Street, the house, over to Academy Street. The house on Park Street is not in the local historic district, although we deem it has a lot of character and it's got a lot of potential to it. And so that's why we've been seeking a potential new use for it. It's moving into a local historic district on Academy Street. And so we've taken this project in front of the Historic District Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission for review. And both of those boards have approved the plan and concept. And as the move takes place, we're taking it to 725 Academy, which is a property that had a fire in 2019. And the majority of the structure that was on the site was burned and was removed from the fire and then from the demolition that followed that. There's still a house on the front, the original house at 725 Academy, and Mike and his group purchased that property in September of 2019 and began some initial work to secure that house for the winter, and they're intending to start renovation on that house this spring. They were thinking about doing a new structure on the back to replace the 8 units that were destroyed in the fire. But as we approached and Mike and talked about this concept of moving the house on Park Street, it was appealing to preserve a historic home and in a sense recycle the home so it doesn't go into a landfill. And to do that though, we're requesting a use variance for a first floor residential use. As you see in your packet, there are a number of houses in the immediate proximity on Academy Street and on South Street that have first floor residential use. That would be the historic use of the site with the residential structure on it. It was the use prior to the fire was residential. There are commercial uses nearby. It is truly a mixed use district with an office building to the west, and then to the west of that, more apartments, including on the ground floor, and across the street, again, a mix of residential on the ground floor and commercial on the ground floor. To the east of this site on Academy Street, again, there are several examples of residential structures on the ground floor and residential uses on the ground floor, as well as commercial. So it truly is a mix, and we feel we're keeping in character with the neighborhood and the historic use of the site by requesting the residential use for that first floor. We're also requesting a dimensional variance for the parking spaces. The site prior to the fire had over 9 parking spaces on it to serve the 10 plus units that were there. In what is somewhat of a unique situation, the house that's being restored on the front that didn't burn, and the house that we're intending to move to the site that would sit on the back, similar to like a carriage house, both of those will be both technically one dwelling unit. And so with the zoning that's in place now, we're allowed 2 parking spaces total, where we had 9 previously and 10 units. If we were to subdivide those houses up again, then it's my understanding the parking would come back with that. The intent, though, is to keep them as single units. There are, however, several bedrooms in each one of those houses, and it's likely that they're going to need more than 1 parking space per house to be practical. There is no shared parking facility in the area, similar to what you'd see in the downtown core. This is on the fringe of downtown, but not in the core, so there are no parking structures or public parking lots. There is on-street parking. In our tours of the site, the on-street parking that is there is pretty extensively utilized already. There's several apartment buildings that have limited parking, and they're using those on-street parking facilities pretty much to their fullest extent in the evening already. There are examples, however, of parking lots on the adjacent properties. And all of those, if they were to go through this zoning process today, would probably have the same issues we're running into at the moment. So for the sake of keeping the parking and the parking needs for this use on its site and not spilling into other areas or taking parking away from the existing residents that use the street parking. We're requesting those additional parking spaces, which would get us back to not quite where the parking was with the previous structure before the fire, but close to that, and we think would handle the needs effectively. So with that, if Mike has comments, I'd be happy to turn it over to Mike and ask for his input as well if he has any. And if not, I'm happy to take questions too.
Mike Keywood here, very well stated. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We think it's a great project to be involved with. We'd love to save that house, keep it out of the landfill. We definitely would need those 2 variances, of course, residential, first floor, and the parking. I think it's a great project. I have reached out to many of the neighbors, not quite all of them, but many. Everyone that I have personally talked to is 100% behind the project of not only remodeling the front house, but also involving and having moved the house behind it. I have a list of neighbors we've talked to. We want to get into details, but very well stated by Kurt. Any questions? Please go.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you. I would just like to clarify, Kurt, were you saying that before the fire, there were 10 parking spaces that you had access to?
There were 10 units on the site prior to the fire, and so we've looked at the old aerials. Neither Mike nor my group owned the property prior to the fire. So when the fire happened, we were not owners, so we don't have that information. But as you look at the old aerial shots, we can count 9 spaces that were on the lot before. Okay. And there is additional land that's there that was paved, and we think that was used for parking. But we see 9 that were striped from the previous use. And again, we're looking at kind of fuzzy older aerials, but that's what we can count on the site. Before the fire.
All right, so we can confirm that there were 9 spaces before the fire, and now that house has been torn down and you're looking to move another house into the space, then there's issues with the zoning changing so that you have these separate structures. So now your parking goes down to 2 spaces.
2 is what's permitted by zoning. And Pete, if you can fill in.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify that, because there is, when we did our last chapter 50 ordinance text amendments, there were some tweaks made to the parking standards, and so the residential reads 1 space per dwelling unit. And then there's a footnote, and it says for detached or attached dwelling units, so either separate structures like single-family homes or more than one, separate building on a property, or attached dwellings like townhouses, up to 2 spaces is permitted. So with that statement added in there, technically that would allow, since these are attached dwelling units and there's one dwelling unit in each of the buildings, each of the structures, it would be 2 spaces per dwelling unit, or 4 would be permissible. So that reduces the variance down to just 4 off-street parking spaces needed tonight.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, that's helpful information. I think that's a little different than what we had discussed, which is why our application has different numbers, but appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, and it also looks like, one of the spaces that was there prior to the fire is actually on what would be the east side of the house. So it was accessed from the adjacent curb cut. And so with this new layout, all the parking spaces are accessed from the the west side of the property. That's been turned into green space. So,
Thank you.
We hope that the new site configuration is really an improvement and enhancement from what was there and what's there now. The goal, like Mike said, is for this to be a great project that preserves two historic homes in the community and kind of revitalizes that section of Academy Street.
Can you speak to your conversations with the property owners at 729 Park Street?
I can give a couple comments and then Mike can give comments as well. 729 is the office building to the west, correct? I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes, and so 729 is an office structure. We have had several conversations with the owner of that structure, and it's been good dialogue. There's a shared easement there between the two properties. It's been there for many decades, and when the fire happened and the house burned, there were several issues, several challenges that took place prior to the ownership by Mike's team, and there's just been, I think, general concern about what's going to happen in the long run with that site and with the property. So with that, I've kind of discussed and explained our project and tried to answer questions for the owner of 729 Academy. And Mike's had several more conversations since, so I'll let Mike step in and answer questions to that as well. If you have any comments, Mike.
Yeah, briefly, I've talked to Jody Milks briefly, who owns that building, and we basically, agreed to, hey, whatever we can do to improve the situation, the neighborhood, the front of the property, the side that she's involved, that we share on, the back of the property, we'd be glad to work with her in the future. The back property right now, just so you know, is basically still a big hole in the ground with fencing around it that looks really bad. So we're trying our best, and I understand she's probably a little upset with the hole being there for 1.5 years, but again, we weren't the owners until we were asked by the current owners to step in and see if we wanted to remodel and take over the project. So Kurt has had a lot of probably more conversations than I have with Jody, and he had a couple-hour talk a few weeks ago. We're on board with working together with not only Jody, but the entire neighborhood as much as we can.
Yeah, I think we've been trying to have that open line of communication as much as possible. So there's both groups have it in their best interest to work together because there's an easement that services both properties. So again, like Mike said, I think we want to have an open line of communication and are trying to as much as we can. We can't undo what was done in previous years when there was previous ownership, but we can move forward as best we can.
Do they support your variance?
So in the written communication that I've seen from them, they have supported the use variance for residential on the first floor. They have concerns about the parking because they have a shared parking lot and, like Mike said, or a shared access drive. And like Mike said, he's committed to working with them to make sure that the access drive and the parking lot function as best as possible. So all I can say, I mean, their words speak for themselves, but what they've shared with us so far is that they have concerns about the parking, but they are in full support of the residential use. We believe the parking, again, goes back to what was there before and enhances the parking arrangement from what was there before the fire.
Mr. Chair.
The neighbor on the other side is to the east of the property would be the Steinigal Group. They own that property and they are 100% in support of doing the same with that drive. It is a shared drive, working together with them and parking. So we're trying to cover both sides of it and work with everybody.
Great. Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that, I mean, these are items that need to be dealt with before the house move can occur, but they're not, germane to, residential occupancy of the ground floor, and if 4 additional off-street parking spaces is appropriate for, the 2 dwelling units we're discussing, one with 5 bedrooms, that's the front building, and the one they're looking to move to the property that ultimately will have 4 bedrooms in it. So, so it's, there's questions that have been raised by the owners of the office building to the west about, the easement and the parking lot maintenance agreement and getting a survey done. And those are all things that need to be dealt with, but, they don't, impact whether there is evidence, and factual information that support granting the 2 variances tonight.
Thank you. So let me see if I can summarize that, Pete. So if we grant the variance for 4 additional parking spots, there may still be issues that the owner of this lot, this site, and the neighbor need to work out, but it doesn't affect whether we grant that motion or not.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Any further comments from city staff before we open it to public hearing?
The only additional comments I'd like to make, I already mentioned the number of bedrooms in each dwelling unit. We talked about the change in the number of parking spaces they actually need to get a variance for. As far as the supplemental information that came out today, I just wanted to mention that for the record. We had a letter of support that came in for both the variances from Pam O'Connor on West South Street. We also have a letter or a statement rather from the city planner, Christina Anderson, talking about this, the ground floor commercial requirement and how it's built into the ordinance. It doesn't necessarily fit all these neighborhood fringe type circumstances. So, that was explained. It's also explained that is something that we intend to update as part of our ordinance amendments in the future. And then the last item that I wanted to mention was obviously we got the correspondence from Matt and Jody Milks at 729 Academy next door. And that's been what was, kind of discussed with some of the points that they had in their correspondence. That is really the gist of what I wanted to add. And, I think there's a lot of merit to this project to save this home if possible. But, these are challenging times, and it's a project that would, if it comes together, would allow for the repurposing of this home rather than demolishing it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Let's open it for public hearing.
And then let me double check here. I don't know if we have any additional voicemail messages. We still do not have any voicemail messages that have come in for 725 Academy. So that would conclude the public comment period.
Thank you. So with the conclusion of the public comment period, can I have a motion on the finding of fact? Oh, Mr. Carroll, I think you're on mute still.
That's never happened to me.
Never happened to any of us.
I move that the finding of fact for 725 Academy Street shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated May 27th, 2020. 73 notices of public hearing were sent, and 1 response was received in support of the variance from Pam O'Connor, a resident at 471 South Street, Unit 508, and is part of the record. A public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. In addition to the information and documents contained in agenda packet staff provided for this request, the Zoning Board of Appeals received additional documents on the request, including a letter of support from the current city planner confirming the variance is congruent with the current master plan, and an email from Jody and Matthew Milks, owners of the office building located at 729 Academy, adjacent to the subject property. The finding of fact shall include these documents just described and also the facts and comments made during the public hearing, which are summarized as follows. Mr. Kurt Artemis with AVB Construction spoke on behalf of the application, as did Mike Hewitt, owner of the subject property 725 Park Street. In 2019, one of the structures was destroyed on this property. The applicants seek to move a 1923 built house from 427 Park to 725 Park Street. The site before the fire contained 9 parking spots as confirmed by aerial photos. There are no close by shared parking lots. There are no shared parking lots close to this property per Kurt Artema. That concludes the summary of fact.
Thank you. Is there a second on that motion?
I second the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I think Chris Flaw beat you to it, Mr. Skalsky.
That's fine.
I'll do a vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion on the finding of facts signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed, same sign. Okay. Now, may I have a motion on the first part of the variance request with that concerns the moving of the house?
One moment. Okay, I make a motion to approve a use variance from Chapter 4, Section 4.2 Q3 to allow the relocation of a single-family dwelling to the rear parcel for residential occupancy where the CN1 district requires commercial use of the floor space on the ground level.
I'll support that motion.
Okay, with a second, is there any discussion?
I'll be in support of the motion. They're putting a house on the property. So that's usually where houses are, the main floor residential units. And so it'll be conforming with the other houses in the area. There are plenty of houses in the area that are main floor residential. So I don't see any reason why this wouldn't fit. Also, it's not on the main drag, it's actually back. It just makes the most sense for what they're trying to do for the Pacific project.
I will be in favor. I think it does fit the area. It's just extending what was there before. And to be honest, the plan looks better than what was there before. And I think salvaging a historical house is a good thing to do and definitely in keeping.
I support it on the basis of the same comments Ms. Stone just made.
Mr. Eldridge, could we have a roll call vote?
We'll start with Ms. Doan,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Skalsky,
Yes.
Flaw,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg.
Yes.
The motion passes. And can I now have a motion on the second part of the variance request?
Yes, one moment. I make a motion to approve a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.2 for 6 off-street parking spaces where 2 off-street parking spaces is the maximum allowed.
Mr. Chair,
Support that motion.
Yes.
can we make that modification of the motion to reduce it down to just a variance of 4 off-street parking spaces per my finding? in our text amendments.
Ms. Doan, do you accept that
Yes.
amendment to your motion?
So
amended
that'll be a
to
total of how many spaces?
It's a variance of 4 off-street parking spaces instead of 6, as it's written.
So they already have 5 available to them.
So they currently have 4, and the goal was to get to 8. So it's only needs 4 more. I think there was a
Gotcha.
miscalculation and it was 2 in the application, but there already are 4 by right.
So amended to 4 extra spots.
And Mr. Skalsky, do you still second that?
Yes, I support with that change.
All right, discussion. I will be in favor of granting the variance for the additional 4 spots. I think that in this area on Academy, it seems customary from when I walk or drive by this area that there is parking adjacent to the buildings along here, and that this isn't the type of residential area where you'd only see 2 or 4 spots in that. It, again, fits the character of the area. Can we have a roll call vote on that?
And we'll start with Mr. Flaw,
Yes.
Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Doan,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Lager,
Yes.
Skalsky.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, it's a great project.
Thanks.
Yep.
We're excited. Hopefully we'll see a house moving down the road soon.
Yep, that'll be fun.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. I don't see our applicant for the Cork Street yet, do we?
Correct.
So let's-
I have reached out to them via cell phone and email and am not able to connect with them. So that is something we'll just have to bring up next month.
Okay. All right, can we have a motion or no? Will the secretary now read the 4th and final application of the night into the record?
Yes, one moment, please. An application for variance for provisions of the zoning ordinance has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals by Ben Berlin, owner of 519 Howard Street, which is situated in Zone CC Commercial Community District. The applicant is requesting a dimensional variance from Chapter 50-7.42A to authorize a loading area for the proposed building on the building's front facade, where loading areas are to be located on the side or rear yard of a building. Please note, this request does not change the zoning classification of the property. This is a request for variance only regarding the item described above.
Thank you. And Mr. Bierlein, it's your opportunity to explain the motion or explain your application.
Thanks for meeting. So the explanation basically is I own a small construction company in town. We've experienced growth in our 20 years of being in business in Kalamazoo locally. And I have been kind of working and processing about building a new brick and mortar spot for us to have storage for our equipment and that kind of thing, bigger than what we have currently. And it's my understanding that the commercial code has changed back like end of 2019, where the loading dock, or in this case would be a overhead door for access of equipment coming and going from that location. So it was kind of a surprise to me after I went to a pre-site plan meeting with a lot of the city officials. It was kind of a follow-up from another city official, Bobby Durkee, that said, "Oh, and by the way, I think this falls into this new criteria, and you might not be able to put an overhead door on the front facade of the building." So again, I was surprised. I said, "Well, what are my options?" And he said, "Well, you can apply for a variance." So with the width of the property and the size of the building that I'm hopeful for, it's really not very feasible to have a side loading dock for access of equipment, trailers and whatnot with their turning, I don't know what you would call it, radius or whatever. And so that would be a struggle.
Okay, any questions from the board? So I don't know how to show this necessarily. I think this picture is sort of the site map that shows the entire lot. Can you sort of explain how much width there is on the side of the proposed buildings? So
Yeah.
if you were to try to build it on the side, how that would work?
Yeah, so the quick dimensions of the lot are 66 feet wide by 132 feet deep. And the building that I would like to build is 50 feet. And so on one side, there's a 6-foot setback. And on the opposite adjacent side is 10 feet. And what you can't see, in a perfect world, I could put, because I can build on a 0 setback line based on what the city requirements and rules are, I could do that, which would give me 16 feet on one side. But with the way that the grade drops, it wouldn't facilitate the height of the building and me being able to let it be a loading area. One of the things that I think maybe potentially is a worrisome, and I know that this, your voting doesn't necessarily get affected because if, say I build this and then I sell it, well, we want to make sure that there's, we're abiding by all the city rules that are put in place. But the way that we're going to use it, we're a residential builder, so we're not going to have semis dropping off material to that location. We have all of our materials, almost 99% of our materials delivered to the residential building site, so we're not double handling it. So this is, for my means of storing trailers and Bobcat and lifts and that type of thing.
And in thinking about the building, is there, just to think about the possibilities here, is there a way that the top door, the garage type door, could be on the back that would work?
So not necessarily. You would end up having to have paved surface around the building to get to that. And so for a trailer or backing it in or access, it wouldn't be conducive, especially with the height elevation. There's about an 8-foot difference from one side of the property to the other in 66 feet.
Additional questions?
Yeah, the other issue that I think you would have with that too is the maneuvering. Even if you've got all 16 feet on one side, to maneuver a vehicle, even a passenger car, in would be difficult. And I can see Bobcats, because they can turn on a relatively small axle radius. It would be difficult to do it another way. So I can sympathize with his point.
And so currently your facility is right across the street, and you do have a front-facing overhead door on that as well, right?
Yes, which I did not build. I purchased it back in like 07 or 08. But yes, it has an overhead door facing and it's on the front facade of the building, yes.
And Mr. Eldridge, is the current one, the way that that's configured there, is that grandfathered in, or is that compliant with the code?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, it would be compliant with the code because it's the storage building is in the rear yard. There's that home that sits further forward. So technically, the front yard is defined as the closest point of the structure to the front property line. In that case, it would be the residential structure. So that building is outside the front yard, and therefore the loading area can be on the front side of the building.
Does these bay door restrictions also apply to residential garages?
This wouldn't apply to residential. No, it would not apply to residential uses, period. And just to add a little color to it, in many cases where you have your quote loading area, many businesses have their dumpster there as well. So that's another reason why the ordinance is structured in a way to push that, that space usage towards the side or rear of the building so that it's not in the front yard. Maybe the applicant can speak to any sort of, refuse containers. I assume they're, those are really at the job site, not at this, at your shop, so to speak.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. We have a dump trailer, so we don't even use roll-off containers any longer. We use our own trailer that can, actuate. It can dump. So I can take it from job site to job site and dump it as needed. What I've seen from the location I'm at is the dumpsters that are part of like the Family Dollar or Skolton's Kitchen is all the neighborhood people use their dumpsters. So no matter what we build there, I will not have an open dumpster for everybody to use whenever they want. So aesthetically, it wouldn't be there, and nor am I going to pay for having other people's trash removed.
Sounds
So
like a
just out of-
practical concern.
Just out of curiosity, if you could, this might be an impossible question, but do your best to answer it. It looks like you're going to have one bay door there, how frequently would you think your cars would be moving in and out of that space?
That is a good question. So, I don't think I'm necessarily going to have cars going in and out of there as often as probably opening the door and me, I don't keep all my tools at my own house or even in my own truck. So we take what we need to the job site that we need. So I'll back, my truck up to that door, load whatever I would need and then take it with me. And that might be a trailer and a Bobcat and my truck or a good handful of things.
So realistically, if you were to switch job sites, you would show up there in the morning with you and whatever your crew needs to be, grab the materials you need, go to the next job site, and then all things considered, the material that needs to stay there would simply stay there, to include bobcats, large equipment, your tools, anything else. And so you really wouldn't even need to come back potentially at night to offload anything.
Correct. Yeah.
So how many are you building, residential houses or commercial buildings?
So we really have gotten away from building new construction. Our niche is really large scale remodels in existing homes. So a lot of people want to be in their neighborhood with the neighbors that they know, and so they've decided to take out a few walls and open up a kitchen or make it more updated, and that's our niche.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
So I'm looking at this picture that shows the mock-up of the building. It looks to me like if it was to think about the ratio of the garage door to the building, it looks like a regular sized garage door. Is that true?
It is. I mean, that drawing is to scale. And included in that drawing, it does have some additional height because we do have some taller equipment. But so like in comparison to like a residential garage, it is quite a bit larger. But included in that, we would like to put a brick facade on the front and make it look like a commercial building that's, kind of, I promise it's going to look really nice, I guess if that's the question, but, by scale, I'm not doing 16 or 20 feet wide like a airplane hangar type door. It's, I think, appropriate to the size of what we're speculating on building.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I ask one clarifying question on that? Is the garage door going to be shorter in height than your current location across the street?
No,
Okay, so
it
just,
will be taller.
okay,
You're talking a 12-foot door or a 10-foot door?
I believe it's 12 foot high.
The question I have on that is that I assume that it's probably going to be an issue where, say, first thing in the morning, you're going in, getting your equipment, and then you're closing the door, and it'll remain closed for the duration. So visually, you're going to have a different type of facade on that specific location. However, it will be closed for 99% of the day, roughly.
I would say 99.9% of the day and week for sure.
Okay. So it won't be visually that you can look in the building and see whatever maybe just laying around. So that is not as bad.
Nope.
Good. Thank you.
I have a question, Pete? Do you know when that code changed?
well, there was a significant code change that occurred in 2005. I suspect that that's when it first, when we first, started moving the loading areas out of the front yard. And then it's got, we've strengthened the language with our recent amendments as far as being more, more articulate on, what is the loading area and where it can be. So it's, I think it goes back to 2005 actually, as far as that, that change.
Okay, I thought it was more recently. And some of this, I'm a residential builder, so a lot of the commercial codes and are a little bit foreign to me. And so when I started this process, I was dealing with a lot of the different city officials that were in place that are no longer in place. And so none of this came up in those beginning talks or conversations. And not that they purposely kept it from me, it just never came up. And so it was a little bit of a surprise after I had paid quite a bit of money to have drawings done and really start to think about investing in the next piece of the business. And so I was taken back when I was at the pre-site plan meeting, really, Bobby Durkee's been really great. And, after that pre-site plan meeting, he sent me an email that had kind of bulleted items that said, we got to, this is kind of a summary of the pre-site plan meeting. These are the things we need. And then at the end, it was almost like a little side note, like, oh, and by the way, something we need to think and look a little bit closer at is the zoning about a front loading dock. And I was like, oh, no, So that's why I'm, asking for the variance to hopefully, if we do move forward, be able to use these same drawings and not have to modify and change and have an additional expense associated with that either.
Yeah, and what I can say is that, it started with the, the loading area as defined on the ground. And now, we look at, where garage door placements are. So, so it's not just, it's not that you could still have garage doors on the front of a building and a loading area shown in the side yard, and that would be okay. And now we've move to, if you're having garage doors on the building, we don't necessarily want to facilitate placement of them on the front of the building. I will say in this case, you've got, you do have the bump out over the entry door of the building. So it adds a little more dimension to the front of the building, and that helps, add character. So it's not just, big garage door and, man door and office window. So I like what you've done, and I think brick would be a really nice look, especially since the one building adjacent to this property is brick right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further comments?
Real quick,
from-
I'm just having a hard time pulling it up on my computer or looking at it. What's the distance between the front of your building and the road? Your proposed building. Does anyone else see that?
Yeah, I mean, visually in the picture, I see about 3 parking spots side by side, so.
I must be looking at the wrong one. 1, 2, 3, and then there's the road. So we're talking
Probably
8 feet.
30 feet.
Okay. And then how far back is, I don't know if you know this, but how far back is the other one from your?
Actually,
It's more like 44 feet.
Sorry.
So it's,
yeah, I was gonna say, it actually is 4 spots.
okay, so we're talking 44 feet from the road before your building is even there. And the other building across the street, is that about 44 feet away from the street?
At least, it's actually, I want to correct myself at 44 feet. It was actually 52 feet.
Okay.
at the road. I was measuring at the sidewalk and then the green space.
Gotcha.
And yes, I would say that the one across the street is, I would potentially say it's even more than 52 feet.
Okay.
Behind the house.
But it's close. It's not like 300 feet.
No.
Okay. Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we turn it over to public hearing? Or the public comments? If not, do we have any public comments?
Yes, we do have a public comment. I will see if we are ready to move forward with it, and here it comes.
Hi, my name is Wendy Horton Bierma, and I'm a property owner at 605 Howard Street in Kalamazoo. I am calling to agree with Ben Bierlein in asking for his zoning ordinance to be approved. I know Ben from being a neighbor of his at 605 Howard, and I think that his zoning variation and the building that he's planning on building would be a nice addition to our property down in that area. Thank you. You can call me back if you have any further questions, 269-323-8770. Take care. Bye.
So that's Wendy, 2 doors to the west of this property we're asking about. And I own the house, which is also zone CC, between her property and this property I'm asking for the variance on.
Which would be 5525, I think is the address of that. Yeah.
Excellent. Unless there's further discussion, could we have a motion for the finding of fact?
I move that the finding of fact for location 519 Howard Street shall include all information included in the notice of public hearing dated May 27th of 2020. 25 notices of public hearing were sent and 0 responses were received and are part of the record. Public hearing was held before the board and public comments were accepted. The applicant, Ben Berlin, is requesting a dimensional variance to authorize a loading area at the front of the building where loading areas are only permitted at the side or back of a building. Due to the width of the lot, it's a 66-foot width by 132-foot deep. It is not feasible to have the overhead door at the side or rear of the building. About You Builders is also owned by Mr. Berlin directly across the street at 522 Howard Street, which has an overhead door on the front of the facade. Since they have building supplies delivered to the construction site, the overhead door looking to be installed at 519 Howard Street will be to allow access to trailers and equipment only. It's estimated that, 95, 99% of the time, the door is going to be closed. It's not going to be left open to be a public nuisance or anything like that. The garage door will be approximately 12 foot high, not smaller than the door across the street. The overhead door in the business across the street is compliant with the code and did not need a variance. We received one public comment in support from Wendy Howard Borma, a neighbor. And this concludes the summary of the finding of fact.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll support it.
All in favor of the motion for finding of fact signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, same sign. Okay,
Aye.
so the motion carries. Now we can have discussion. Oh no, I'm sorry. Ms. Doan, can you read the motion? Can you make the motion?
Yes, one moment. I make a motion to approve a dimensional variance from chapter 50-7.4, 2A, to authorize a loading area for the proposed building on the building's front facade, where loading areas are to be located on the side or rear yard of a building.
Is there a second?
I second that.
I'll second that motion.
For a couple seconds. Discussion.
I'm going to be in favor of allowing him to have a bay door. It sounds like he's going to be using it very lightly, no more, maybe even less than a normal residential unit that happens to have 2 garage stalls on it or 1 garage stall. And it's pretty far away from the street. We're talking 52 feet, which is a significant setback. I mean, realistically, that's a lot of space. That's you can fit a house in there. So I think given those circumstances, the way that he's going to be using it, favor from the neighbors, I think it'll be a value to the city. So I will be in favor.
And to add to that, also, I think the shape of the property makes it too difficult to have it on any other part of the building. So I will be in favor as well.
All right, could we have a roll call vote? And again, let's do this. The motion, a yes, is to grant the variance to allow the front facing overhead door, and no is to disallow the variance or disallow the door.
Correct. Okay, we'll begin with Mr. Skalsky.
Yes.
Excuse me. Mr. Flaw,
Yes.
Ms. Vanden Hamburg,
Yes.
Ms. Doan,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Lager.
Yes. The motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Is there a specific timing on, I mean, obviously this is approved. I'm also finding there's some other challenges with this property about water and storm containment because it's in a wellhead capture zone. So I'm trying to get all my ducks in a row. I just want to make sure that this approved variance, is there like a 6-month timing or a 12-month timing, or is now that it's approved, it's approved for me as the owner and whenever it happens?
It's 12 months. It's one year from the date of it granting that you've got to commence the construction.
Okay.
So hopefully if you can get those items worked out in that period of time.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And in regard to our other agenda item, I have been unsuccessful in reaching out and making contact with the applicant. So that will be, it is on the agenda, so we should have a motion to table that, I presume, Clyde? Since we have an agenda item that we can't act on right now.
Well, I don't know that you can't act on it. You can, obviously you don't have the applicant coming before you to make the argument, but I don't think there's anything that precludes the board, if it wishes to go forward, to
So we
act on
could,
it without the applicant being present
so we could approve this without the applicant being present?
or deny it. Because
Right.
this is an opportunity for the applicant to be heard. If they choose not to be heard, then they take their risks that they're going to be approved or denied. Now, on the other hand, if the board wishes to give the applicant the opportunity to be heard on it, and you don't want to take action, you certainly can defer it for a month in order to make that contact. The only reason I say that is that the gentleman in his application wants to begin, I think, as soon as possible. I think his go date was June 12th. So ostensibly approving it tonight, he was prepared to up and operating as soon as tomorrow. If you wait another month, he's going to lose the opportunity to open his business on that site for another 30 days.
Okay, thank you,
I
Clyde.
drove by
Yeah,
that site the other day, and
So I would open it up if someone would like to make the motion.
well, Mr. Chair, if I can add, staff is, because this is an approval of a temporary use that's outside the bounds of what staff can administratively approve. Staff does not have any strong objection to this 4-month. We haven't gotten any negative feedback from the public, and we've provided a list of conditions that need to be met. The one that was not on there is the fire marshal contacted me to state that a safety inspection still needs to be done of the food truck. And Clyde and I talked, and if there was going to be any seating next to the food truck or on the property, any outdoor seating, that social distancing guidelines would need to be maintained. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, we already have teed up all the conditions to put with this. So it's a matter of what is the board comfortable with? Do you want to hear from the applicant?
Oh, I have something to say. We've approved these before, and I just see a lot of positivity with it, and I was planning on voting yes.
Secretary Doan, would you make a motion or shall I?
Go ahead, Mr. Carroll.
I make a motion to approve the application for provisions of the zoning ordinance for 112 East Course Street. The variance from Chapter 4, Section 4.3 J7 would to be allow for an outdoor temporary sales use to operate in the parking lot of the convenience store from June 12th, 2020 to October 15th, 2020, 4 months. And I recommend the conditions for approval include a grill, table, food truck not to be within the right of way. Number 2, transient merchant license must be obtained by the city clerk. And 3, must also have license from the health department. And finally, number 4, cleanup of site must occur daily when in operation.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes, sir.
would you be acceptable to adding the condition that the food truck also needs to undergo the fire marshal safety inspection, and if there's outdoor seating, that the social distancing guidelines be enforced?
Let me attempt that. Number 5, all appropriate vehicles and entities be inspected by and approved by the fire marshal. And number 6, that any seating lines or other social interactions meet social distancing guidelines.
Thank you.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
Staff, did we approve this guy before in the past, this exact same person?
No, this is
think
a
so.
different one.
I think,
I recall it.
are you sure? You sure it's a different one?
He's operated on several different sites around the city over the years. So he did, and I add some background here. So he operated on this very corner when the convenience store was open, and he was operating as an extension of the brick and mortar operation because they were cooking the food outside and bringing it in, and they had a food service counter in the store where they had the barbecued food and then sides to go with it. So it was actually, being operated in conjunction with the store, but then they had a fire back in 2018 and there was no insurance. So that convenience store has no timeline for when it's going to be reopened. However, he is now wanting to continue his food business and has permission from the property owner, but it's now a temporary use because the brick and mortar operation has ceased to exist. So that's how, he has been before the board in the past for a site on Riverview Drive, and he has been cooking at this particular corner actually for a very long time, in conjunction with the business that was open there. So he is a known quantity.
Perfect.
And there haven't been any complaints. There wasn't any last time. There's no new complaints against him or his business? Question for staff?
Nope, none received.
Thank you.
This is great. I remember when we met with a gentleman who was wanting to do this before. I think it was at Riverview, and it's good to know that we can approve something if the person isn't able to speak.
Excellent. Any further discussion or roll call vote?
And as far as public comment goes, there were no voicemails received for this particular case. So we did not get any responses.
Okay, thank you. First, I guess we still need to do a motion of the finding of fact. Could someone summarize the facts based upon the material in the package? In fact,
I can wait. Go ahead.
I could try to make that motion.
Good.
Okay, so applicant in this case, Terrence and Katisha Burton, would like to have operated a barbecue selling business outside of this property. It's 1112 East Cork Street on the corner of Cork and Burdick. They've operated for some time when the convenience store that's there was in place and want to continue to operate that from June 12th through October 15th, 2020. There have been no complaints, and there's been significant discussion with city staff already in preparation for this. Is there a second for that?
I'll support that motion.
I second the finding.
Okay. All in favor of the finding of fact signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Any discussion? No, let's do a roll call vote.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry, just for clarification, we did Mr. Chair Logger, you read the finding of fact. Mr. Skalsky seconded it. We did a voice vote approval on that, so we need,
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right.
but we had, wait a minute. We had Jeff Carroll make the motion.
We made the motion at first, then we found, then we stated
we
the
backed
facts
up.
on which we're going to base our decision. So we did it out of order, but we do have that motion on the table.
Okay. So we have the motion made by Mr. Carroll, which includes the 6 conditions. And that was seconded by,
Ms. Vanden Hamburg, if I'm correct.
yes. That is correct.
Can I
Okay.
ask how many notices were sent?
Notices sent were,
For the record, I also seconded that, so.
17 notices were sent
Thank you both.
and 0 responses were received. Okay. So this is a vote to approve the temporary use with the 6 conditions placed upon it. And we will start with Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Logger,
Yes.
Mr. Skalsky,
Yes.
Mr. Flaw,
Yes.
Ms. Vanden Hamburg,
She lip synced, yes. You're on mute still.
I saw that. Okay. So we have
Yes.
you down for a yes. And then Ms. Doan.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, wonderful. And you'll be very happy to hear that.
With that, we are adjourned for the evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Night.